Welcome to the special edition of Chatting the Pictures. Well, Michael, impeachment is about to get very public and even more visible.
Tomorrow, the live hearings get started. So we have a number of photographs that capture the span of the crisis.
Let's talk Trump and Ukraine.
This first photograph was taken by Saul Loeb for AFP Getty Images. It's an array of photographs that were taken on the sidelines of the recent UN General Assembly session in September with President Trump meeting with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky.
The first thing I want to say is, both of these gentlemen are former television stars. So I think it's appropriate to just say that this reads a little bit like an Odd Couple sitcom moment, doesn't it?
You have the comedian and the reality show host. I think it starts on a humorous vein in terms of the montage, but there's really a lot to excavate here. Zelensky is hardly speaking in any of the photographs, and he really looks more like Trump's sidekick if you're thinking about that American late night television.
The top row and about half of the second row are really Trump as raconteur. And that talk show analogy, I think, is better than my sitcom analogy because it really hits this idea of whose show is it?
There's also some really interesting individual images here, like that first photograph on the top row. It clearly feels like Trump grandstanding and Zelensky looking more like the extortion bribery victim that he purportedly is. You really see him at Trump's mercy. That might be actually where the hearings end up in terms of the most illustrative image. Then the last picture on the second row, that might also be the most revealing with Trump looking off stage, and clearly neither one of these men is happy.
Folks may want to remember that this was the moment where Trump is talking publicly about the phone call. He was taking questions about the phone call, and Zelensky says, nobody pushed me. So there's this kind of sidekick dynamic / victim dynamic that I think is you see playing out in these photos, where it's this kind of moment of, sinking in perhaps on both of their parts.
What's also interesting when you see a montage is how effective it is in reflecting all the different versions of reality that are out there. Not to mention also how much, there's a distraction game. The fact that there's something here for everyone in terms of different images or each side is also picked up by the fact that there's only one photograph that I can tell that even suggests any eye contact between the two. So it's a very kind of parallel presentation here.
I think that's a really good point. You have this dynamic that's really more about the watchers than the interaction between them. They're performing some kind of a relationship or they're performing some kind of conversation, but it's happening in front of all of the lenses. Really, this whole sequence is a kind of Rorschach test for where you might fall down on the it was a perfect phone call, it was an impeachable offense spectrum. Another key set of players here are the Democrats, and particularly the media spectacle.
This photo was taken by Kerr Patrick for the New York Times. It's a photo of Adam Schiff that was published in the New Yorker as their impeachment hearing preview.
One of the first things that strikes me about this image is not all those lights are aimed at Adam Schiff. It appears as though there are other things being lit and covered here, which suggests a kind of competition for attention in the middle of the spectacle that is going to be unfolding in these impeachment hearings. So to the extent that the Democrats want to very much direct and control the media framing of these events, the photo also suggests that that might be more difficult than they want it to be.
Yeah, the lights are really interesting, aren't they? They look bright, they look hot. I think that speaks to how much of a wild card this whole process is, the risk for the Democrats, the risks for the Republicans, and what will be revealed under that intense scrutiny or under that glare.
The photo also points to the fact that Schiff really will be the star of the show. When the information came out about how the hearings would be run, it was very clear that Schiff is going to be leading the questioning with the collaboration of minority member Devin Nunes. And so we'll be seeing a lot of Schiff, and Schiff will become really the face of this particular part of the impeachment inquiry.
And I really think that he's on the spot. I mean, I think that's why the photo was so compelling to the New Yorker, where they really do some fabulous photo editing there. Schiff really is on the spot. When you think about how the Ukraine scandal unfolded with the Mueller report and how it got bogged down in details, we know from the get-go on the Ukraine scandal that the Democrats have really packaged this whole thing for simplicity, for speed, but Schiff does not have the charisma that, a lot of other people in this whole crisis do. So, the real question here is how much can Schiff deliver and how much can substance and these legislators counter the Trump show?
I look at those lights and the cameras and the tripods, and in the absence of any other people in the photo, they almost look like creatures unto themselves. The lights are the heads and the bodies and the cameras. And so it's kind of who can control the media beast? And is Schiff going to be able to do that? Are the Democrats going to be able to shape their own narrative? And the beast may literally overwhelm everything else.
Who knows really what we're in for. And I think also that little test pattern in the monitor far right also speaks to that.
Yeah, I love that too, because, test pattern used to be what you saw on TV back in the days when TV actually went off, and TV never goes off anymore, does it?
Right. Well, should we move on to our testimony image?
Let's do that.
This photograph was taken by Aaron Schaff, the really talented young photographer for the New York Times. And what we see is George Kent. George Kent is the Deputy Assistant Secretary who oversaw Ukraine policy at the State Department. He's a career diplomat. He's still in his position, which is novel. And in his deposition, he basically confirmed that a White House meeting was offered to Zelensky in exchange for opening investigations into the 2016 election, into Hillary Clinton, and also into Joe Biden.
I keep thinking of this image of a boxer coming into the ring. He looks ready, doesn't he? Jogging up these stairs, his, fists. I feel like, Rocky's going to come out and do some shadow punching. He seems ready for whatever was coming to him on that day.
I love what I would call his expression of eagerness. And to me, what this says is the revenge of the State Department, or Kent giving expression to the professional diplomatic corps being able to come forward in a way where they've not just been suppressed, but really forsaken.
Yeah, it's sort of like they've been let out of the basement and they're allowed to come upstairs to the light of day, right, and talk. But they need protection and safety, don't they? And that the presence of the officers/bodyguards as escorts, I think, is important too. The question of from whom do folks like Kent need to be protected?
In this case, those police really stand out in terms of the protective role and the need for protection. And in real life, there have been death threats to Fiona Hill, the NSC director, and also Ambassador Yovanovitch. So it's very much the case that these officials do need protection. And I think we really have to take note of Kent's attire also. With the bow tie and the vest, he really looks like a throwback to that professional class that really has been disrespected and demonized by the Trump administration.
Should we move on and talk about the evidence?
This photograph was also taken by T.J. Kerr Patrick for the New York Times. What it is illustrating are pages of the transcript from the House impeachment inquiry that was released to the public 1 week ago. I believe that almost 2,700 pages of transcripts have been released from the 8 witnesses.
This is a really representative image, I think, of where the American public, if it isn't already, will be as soon as the more public phase of the hearings emerges. I look at this picture and I think John Q. Public trying to find the evidence, trying to scan for information and getting knowledge. The highlighter seems really the most key thing to me. It's brilliant. It's just kind of like, okay, what are the highlights? Let's flip through and find the highlights. And the fact that we don't see all of the guy with the documents really does suggest that we can insert ourselves into that picture as well, so that the subject of the photo is the highlighter and that information on those pages.
When we refer to the transcript, different people are talking about different things, because the Democrats would be talking about the transcript of the testimony given by these diplomats, whereas the Trump supporters are talking about the transcript as the edited transcript of the telephone call between Trump and Zelensky. We're seeing legions of Trump fans in T-shirts with the words "read the transcript," which supposedly exonerates the president because it was a perfect call, when if anybody reads the transcript of both the testimony and the call, it's pretty easy to see that the abuse of power is right there on the surface.
This photo worries me for precisely that reason that you mentioned, that we can read into the transcript, whatever transcript we're thinking about, in a variety of different ways. And part of what I've been hearing and noticing in the media over the last few days, especially as we're leading up to these public hearings, is a very Trumpian disregard for the evidence at all. I wonder, or I worry, about the extent to which the evidence, the documents, the transcripts, and the testimony is going to become utterly irrelevant to the way this all plays out politically.
And I don't think that that's surprising at all, because since Trump started running for president, one of his mantras has been to attack the liberal elite, bureaucratic Washington, and he's really been promoting this ethos of anti-intellectualism. And then what's really scary is how elected officials have taken up that mantra. So whether you're talking about Nikki Haley or Lindsey Graham famously saying that he's not even going to read the transcript, that it's a bunch of baloney, that's a real concern, because that's the stance.
And you have to wonder how this will play out when the public hearings begin, where we're able to move beyond a transcript and into that more visible, mediated space.
Well, thank you for joining us this week. We will see you again in 2 weeks with another edition of Chatting the Pictures.